Alright, I'm on a mission to serve up Flask apps using Docker. By adding just 2 files that need to be configured the right way, I'm still figuring that part out. But by adding just 2 files, we would be able to, once you download this package, our Flask app, and you execute one command, it would automatically pull down the Docker images necessary. It would launch your app and allow you to start working. So that means that if you want to work offline on your own computer without Cloud9, you could quickly set that up and build your own environment on your machine. That also means if you're trying to deploy to a new server, it's lightning fast and scalable, because if you need more copies of your app to be running simultaneously, you can just spin up more Docker images and plug them into a growing swarm or network. So Docker is very exciting in how it can give us some flexibility and some scalability. So I have a couple good guides. This one in particular is really close to what I'm trying to build. However, I'm trying to serve a Flask app with a database and using a web server to serve that app. But this is really funny, and I'm a little confused about this blog post, because as we see down here, they're running the host, even though that they're running an Nginx server, it looks like they are just proxying essentially the run server command, which is single-threaded. It doesn't scale very well. And it looks like they would scale by just running multiple images. And I think you could get so much more horsepower out of this. I mean, frankly, I don't exactly understand. Because look, if we look at a service, so when we use Whiskey, we're running our app, Fippler in this instance, we're running our app as a service, and it's being passed over to through the web server as needed. And you can see that it's running a lot more, and it can handle many clients simultaneously. Okay, let's stop talking about theory, and let me walk you through what I've got so far. So it all starts with this Docker Compose. YAML is just a simple, think of it like a JSON file, just slightly different formatting. And so it's a nice thing that just says this is an object of that. So you could shrink this all down into one line if you really wanted to, and you could denote the subordinate relationships. But anyway, so this is my YAML file, Docker Compose, and I'm just saying what version of Docker to pull from, 3, whatever the latest release of 3 is. Same thing with whatever the latest release of Postgres 10 is. And so that's what I'm starting with. Build me a database, and it'll create a computer, a fake computer, a virtual machine, a Docker container. So it'll boot up a machine, and it'll have this as its host name. As soon as it crashes or whatever, it'll immediately come right back up. It connects to a volume, which is defined down here. I don't totally understand that. What they're trying to do is build in a level of persistence so that every time I reload this, it'll pull a saved database, and so that way I won't lose any information. For every time it turns on, it'll just resume the same one. Not sure how that's working. This is just for test. Normally, you would never want to have a username, password, and the name of your database hard-coded where everyone can see it, but this is just for testing. So normally, I'll put this into an environmental file later on, but this sets up a username and password to interact with the database, and that's what's built into my settings for my Flask app. It'll try to talk to this thing. And then I put it onto a network so that the things can talk to each other. And that's coming straight out of this guide that you'll see there. And then I name the container, and that's the database. And now I do something similar to the Flask app. But the Flask app isn't being pulled from an image. Instead, it's being pulled from a build file. The build file is just this Docker. So it just says build this Docker. So this, it says, okay, start with this image right here, the latest version of Python 3.6. So it'll grab that image, and you can see my images. It'll just grab this image here. The Slim didn't work because regex and other needed a larger set of Python tools, and so the Slim one didn't have that. So I used to have -slim off of this. I got rid of that, and just Python 3.6 works great. And now it runs a bunch of other commands. It creates a directory, it updates, and it establishes this as the work directory. So if I ever mention the name of a file, it knows where I'm pulling that from. It copies over all of the volume, and so here you can see that it says, okay, look, my folder on my computer here, I want that linked to this folder on the machine, just on the root folder, Flaskini. And so this command copies from one to the other, and then I install everything from requirements. Again, I don't need to specify where that requirements folder is, because it'll just pull it from the work directory. So it'll install everything, I open the port up, and then I try running a terminal command to kick Whiskey off. I'm not running it as a service, and as a result, I'm running it from root, and it is not happy about that. So doesn't like any of this. It doesn't work super well. It can't find the module, and that's because I did it not. It should be there. Anyway, so the whole thing is a hot mess, and even if I get it working the way that it's currently set up here, it's not running it as a service, like I said I was really trying to do. So I want to use the commands we got from this DigitalOcean guide on how we configure our server and build the commands that we did in order to set up that file to running as a service. Add the commands right into the Docker file here. So when our Python image is pulled down and set up, it configures the container to run very much like how our DigitalOcean servers are running. And that way it'll plug right into the Whiskey. It'll use Whiskey to plug into the Nginx server, and we'll have a more scalable solution. That's what I'm guessing. Actually, I'm still trying to figure this out. I was following along Jorge Escobar's awesome Docker course, but it doesn't particularly address the services that he set up in his other Flask apps. So that piece is I'm still sort of trying to figure out, how do I take some of the setup that we did in the last Flask app that made sense to me for scalability and for resiliency of running it as a service and using a socket. Do we just not use that on Docker? So these are the questions I'm trying to figure out, and my first attempt is to transpose some of these commands and this style service setup into the Docker configuration file, so that when we build the Docker app and it connects with all of these things, that it will run resiliently and as it's using as much horsepower as possible, because I am confused and concerned about trying to set things up so that it's on a single port. Well, I mean, it would all be going through a single port, but on a single thread. I think that's, yeah. Anyway, so clarification or support in any way would be appreciated.